The July morning air in the city was already heavy with heat and tension. The sidewalks buzzed with hurried footsteps, taxis honked in frustration, and the glass towers of downtown shimmered in the sunlight like silent giants. Among them stood one of the most imposing buildings of all, Kensington Heights, home to billion-dollar boardrooms and unreachable power. Inside, a polished black car parked just outside. Samuel Grant adjusted the cufflinks on his suit, checking his reflection. One last time. He didn't smile. He never did unless a deal closed. At 47, he had built an empire from the ground up. Real estate, tech, media. The world saw him as brilliant, fearless, even intimidating. But those who worked closely with him knew better. Samuel Grant didn't stop. He didn't pause. He didn't bend. This morning was another high-stakes meeting, one that could unlock $1 billion expansion across Asia. It was timed to the second. Samuel stepped out of his car, nodded at the doorman, and entered the sleek lobby without looking back. Then it happened. A small voice, thin, quivering, almost lost in the noise of the spinning doors, and murmured greetings. "Excuse me, Sir." Samuel stopped, not because of the words, but because of the voice. It wasn't from a polished assistant or a corporate intern. It was raw, real, human. He turned his head slightly and saw her. A little girl stood near the wall, barely up to his waist in height. She wore a faded pink dress, once probably bright and cheerful, now dulled and wrinkled. Her shoes were too big, stuffed with paper at the toes. Her hands clutched a worn backpack with a single button pinned to it, a smiley face that had long since faded. Her eyes, however, were the most striking, wide, silent, desperate. "Can you help my mom?" she asked, her voice shaking but still strong enough to carry through the marble lobby. Samuel blinked. He wasn't sure what to say. It was as if the whole building hushed in that moment. The security guards, the receptionists, the elevator chimes, all waiting. "She's sick," the girl added, stepping forward. "Really sick, and no one's listening to me." People were starting to stare. Samuel cleared his throat, more out of habit than discomfort. He looked around. "Where is she?" The girl pointed toward the side hallway that led to the employee elevator. "She fainted upstairs, trying to get a job. They told her she needed to leave, but she couldn't walk." Samuel's mind raced. Was this a setup? A scam? Surely, security would have noticed. But then again, his gut, the same instinct that had guided him through hostile markets and impossible deals, told him this was something different, something real. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya," she said. "Maya Hill." "How old are you, Maya?" 7, she said, lifting her chin. "I can take care of her, I promise. I just need someone to help her get to a doctor." "She's not waking up." Something cracked inside him then, something he didn't even know was there. Samuel Grant, the man who turned down interviews, who had walked away from charities without blinking, was suddenly walking beside a little girl in oversized shoes through a back hallway toward an elevator that creaked on its way up. He cancelled his meeting, just like that dot, and when the elevator door opened on the 17th floor, the first thing he saw was a woman slumped against the wall, her face pale, her breaths shallow. A few people stood nearby, unsure of what to do. One receptionist looked relieved that someone else had taken charge. Samuel rushed over. He knelt beside her, gently touched her shoulder. She didn't respond. "Maya," he said, steady but urgent. "Has she eaten today?" She shook her head. "Only a piece of bread. We had to save the rest of the money for her medicine." He took out his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance right now." "But they won't come fast," Maya said quickly. "They said we had no address. We don't live anywhere." His thumb froze on the screen. The girl's words hit harder than he expected. "We've been staying behind the church on 5th Street. Maya continued. "But last night it rained, and she got cold again." Samuel stood up, looked around, and barked an order to the receptionist. "Get building medics now, and clear a room with a couch and water." This time no one questioned him. They moved fast. As they lifted the woman gently, Maya held her mother's hand tightly. Samuel didn't move away. He didn't leave when the medics arrived. He didn't leave when the woman stirred and coughed weakly, whispering her daughter's name. He stayed. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt something more powerful than any business victory. This was not going to be another normal day. What Samuel didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was that helping Maya's mother wasn't the end. It was the beginning, because what came next would shatter his carefully built world. challenge everything he thought he knew about family, and awaken memories he had buried deep in silence. Stay close. The most shocking part hasn't even begun. The room they moved her into was meant for business meetings, not emergency care. Sleek, glass walls, a long oak table, soft leather chairs. But that morning, it became something entirely different. A safe place, a pause in the chaos. Maya's mother, Elena Hill, lay wrapped in a soft blanket on a couch near the window. The building's medical staff had given her fluids, checked her vitals, and assured Samuel that she was stable, weak, severely dehydrated, and in urgent need of medical attention beyond their scope, but stable for now. Samuel sat in a chair, across from Maya, who hadn't let go of her mother's hand even once. Her tiny frame was curled up at her mother's side, the oversized backpack still slung over one shoulder like a shield. "You did the right thing," Samuel said softly. Maya turned her face toward him, eyes cloudy from exhaustion, but still alert. "I didn't know what else to do. You were brave." Maya looked down, fidgeting with the frayed strap of her backpack. "I was scared, but I kept thinking, if I didn't ask someone, she might not wake up." Samuel leaned back slightly, watching her closely. There was a quiet strength in this little girl, not the kind found in words or posture, but in persistence, the kind born from necessity, not choice. "Where's your father?" he asked gently. Maya didn't look up. "He left when I was 2. Silence. "And your family, grandparents?" She shook her head. "We came here from Ohio last year. Mom thought we could start over." The weight of that hit him harder than expected. A mother and daughter, completely alone, surviving off scraps and hope in the heart of a city known for its wealth and cruelty in equal measure. Elena stirred then. Her lips moved, a whisper barely audible. Maya leaned in. "Mom." Samuel stood, quickly, stepping closer. Lena opened her eyes slowly, blinking in confusion. "Maya," she croaked. "I'm here, Mom," Maya whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "You're okay now. He helped us." Elena turned her head slightly, her gaze finding Samuel. Her lips trembled. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a small nod. "You need real care. I've already arranged for a private clinic to send transport. You'll be safe there." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. "We can't afford anything. Please, don't." "This isn't charity," Samuel interrupted gently. "It's help. Real help. No strings." He didn't say more, but something about his voice, firm, warm, and completely certain, made her nod in silence. Later that day, after the medics had transferred Elena into the waiting vehicle, Samuel sat alone in his office staring at the skyline. The city looked different. The people below seemed smaller, quieter. He couldn't shake the feeling, not guilt, not pity, but something deeper. He had built towers out of money and numbers, but for the first time in years, he had witnessed something truly human. It didn't stop there. That evening, he asked his assistant to dig deeper. "Just basic information," he said. "Nothing invasive." But what came back was more than he expected. Elena Hill had once been a college honors student, majored in nursing, dropped out after a car accident that left her with hospital bills she couldn't pay. She had no criminal record, no drug history, just a long, painful trail of bad luck and harder choices. She had applied for over 30 jobs in the last 6 months, cleaning offices, assisting at nursing homes, reception work, all rejected. Too many applicants, not enough experience, or simply, "We'll let you know." As for Maya, she'd been attending a public library program for kids twice a week. She never missed a day. She read beyond her grade level. Staff there described her as bright, polite, focused. It was the kind of report that stung, because in his world, people with those traits thrived. In hers, they were ignored. He thought about his own childhood, the silence of empty rooms, the pressure to perform, to win, to be useful. His parents had provided everything, except presence. His success had been born from that vacuum. But now, looking into Maya's world, he saw something he had never valued before, the quiet heroism of survival. The next morning he visited the clinic. He didn't alert them first, he just showed up. Maya was coloring in a notebook when he arrived. She looked up, surprised but not afraid. "I brought something for you," Samuel said. He held out a small bag. Inside was a new set of colored pencils, a notebook with sturdy pages, and a soft purple scarf. Maya touched the scarf gently, then looked up. "Thank you," he smiled, but what she said next stopped him cold. "Did you come because you feel sorry for us?" He blinked. "No," he said after a pause. "I came because you reminded me of someone." "Who, myself?" he admitted. Quietly, Maya tilted her head. "But you're rich." He almost laughed. "That didn't come first." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that says more than words ever could. That afternoon, Samuel made a decision, one that startled even his inner circle. He offered Alina Hill a position, not a handout, not a pity job, but a real opportunity. He owned a foundation dedicated to urban health access, one that had been run by others with little direction. He asked Alina to be part of the team, to help shape it. Her nursing background and first-hand experience made her the perfect person. At first, she hesitated, but Samuel looked her in the eyes and said, "You earned this. You survived. You kept going. Now, I want to help you move forward, not out of guilt, but because you matter." She accepted. What no one knew yet was that this connection between a billionaire and a mother and daughter with nothing would grow into something far more powerful than anyone expected, because the past has a way of returning, and some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, have a voice of their own. And one of those secrets was about to change everything. 2 weeks passed, and for most people, life went on. But for Samuel Grant, the encounter with Maya and Alina had left a permanent mark, not just on his calendar, which now included weekly updates on progress in Maya's schooling, but on his thoughts, on the quiet moments between meetings, on the rare pauses he allowed himself to breathe. Alina had started her new role at the Kensington Health Initiative, and within days, she'd done more for the struggling foundation than the previous directors had in months. She wasn't flashy, she wasn't loud, but she was determined. She understood suffering from the inside, and that gave her an instinct no training could replicate. And Maya, she was blossoming. With a warm bed, regular meals, and her mother smiling again, she seemed to glow brighter by the day. Samuel had arranged for her to attend a private community school nearby, small class sizes, creative learning, and teachers who truly cared. But something else was growing too, something Samuel hadn't planned for. It started with a letter, a cream-colored envelope with no return address, delivered directly to his personal office. That was strange. Only his assistant had the clearance for that. He turned it over, curious. The handwriting was elegant, almost old-fashioned. His name was written in ink, with care. He opened it. The letter was brief, but every word hit like thunder. "You don't know the whole truth. She's not who you think she is, and neither are you." No signature, no clues, just a chill that wouldn't leave. Samuel sat back, the letter trembling slightly in his hand. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but this felt personal. Someone knew about Alina. Someone was watching. He didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Instead, he began quietly digging, not out of suspicion, but because the letter stirred something deeper, memory. Late at night, long after the city had quieted, Samuel sat by the fireplace in his apartment. He rarely thought about his childhood anymore. Those silent rooms, the ache of being unwanted in a house full of wealth. But the letter stirred something, a smell, a sound, a moment, a girl crying in a hospital waiting room, a woman with the same eyes as Maya. He shook his head. It couldn't be. It was too far back, too blurred. Still, the feeling wouldn't go away. The next day, he called a man named Arthur Reed, a retired investigator who had worked for his family decades ago. If anyone could trace something lost in time, it was Arthur. "I need you to look into someone," Samuel said. "Not for business, for me." Arthur didn't ask questions. He never did. Just said, "Give me a name, Alina Hill, and her daughter, Maya. But not just now. I think something connects us. From years ago, maybe even from when I was a child." Arthur paused. "You think they're family?" "I don't know what to think," Samuel admitted. "But I've been having memories I thought were long gone." While Arthur got to work, something else was unraveling in the background. One morning, at the Health Foundation office, Alina found a small envelope taped to her desk. No one saw who left it. Inside was a photograph, blurry, faded, clearly taken decades ago. But the face, it was a boy, maybe 8 or 9, standing near a hospital bed, and in that bed, a woman who looked almost like Alina. She stared at it for a long time. Her hands trembled as she turned it over. There was writing on the back. Some things were never buried. Some people were never forgotten. She didn't show the photo to Samuel, not yet. But that night, After Maya fell asleep, she pulled out a box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were papers, notes, scraps of a life she'd tried to leave behind. Among them was a birth certificate, and a second one, altered, faded, but still legible. Names scratched out, new ones written over. She closed her eyes. It was time to tell the truth. But before she could, Arthur called Samuel. His voice was different, cautious, quiet. "I found something," he said. "Or rather, someone." Samuel sat up straight. "Who?" "A nurse. Retired now. He used to work at St. Clair's. She remembers a boy abandoned after his mother died, taken in by a wealthy couple. Name changed, life erased, but she kept records." Samuel's breath caught. "What does this have to do with Alina?" Arthur hesitated. "She was there, same hospital, around the same time, but her records, they're sealed, altered, like someone didn't want her found." A silence stretched between them. Then Arthur said, "There's more. I need to show you in person tonight." Samuel agreed, and as he hung up the phone, the weight of everything pressed against him. Something in his past was trying to break through, and somehow, a little girl in oversized shoes, and a mother with tired eyes, were tied to it all. What Samuel didn't know was that the truth, the real truth, would not only shake his identity, but force him to make a choice that could cost him everything he had built. The past was calling, and this time, he couldn't ignore it. The city had never looked darker. Manhattan's usual glow was drowned out by a low mist that clung to the streets like an unspoken secret. Samuel's car slid quietly through traffic, his driver silent, as always, respecting the tension in the air. But this time, the silence wasn't born of stress over a merger or a falling stock. This time, the silence carried a weight Samuel didn't yet have words for. He arrived at Arthur Reed's brownstone just after 9 p.m. The house, old but well kept, stood at the edge of a quiet block, the kind of place where truth had time to breathe. Arthur greeted him with a grim nod, then led him inside to a study filled with filing cabinets, maps, and photographs pinned to corkboards like echoes of forgotten lives. "You said you found something," Samuel said, his voice low, wary. Arthur motioned to the desk. "You need to see this for yourself." There, spread out carefully, were documents that didn't belong together, or so it seemed at first. A hospital intake form from 1989, a social services case number, a sealed adoption notice, a list of names, none familiar, but all tied to one story, one family, and one moment that had changed everything. Arthur tapped the corner of a faded black and white photo. "That's you, age 9, taken the day after your mother died." Samuel stared at it. The boy in the picture wore the same eyes he saw in the mirror every morning, but he had no memory of that day. Only vague fragments, a woman's voice singing in the dark, a warm hand holding his in a cold hallway. Then nothing, then wealth, a new last name, and silence. "She wasn't just any woman," Arthur continued. "Your mother worked in the same wing where another patient was being treated, a young girl named Alina Hartwell. That's her original name. She was placed in protective custody just days after your mother passed. Then her records were altered." Samuel's throat tightened. Why would anyone change her records? Arthur looked at him. "Because someone didn't want her found. I think the two of you saw something, or knew something." There was a fire in the hospital archives 6 months later. Half the records lost, but some were stored off-site. "That's what I found." He placed a thin, plastic-wrapped envelope in front of Samuel. Inside was a letter, yellowed, brittle, and never delivered. Samuel opened it slowly. The handwriting was neat, precise, written by a dying woman, his mother. "If anything happens to me, please protect them. Both of them. They're just children, and they deserve a chance at the life I never had." There was no name, just a date, and a line that struck like lightning. "Alina is not just another child. She's family." Samuel sat frozen. For the first time in years, his mind didn't race ahead. He didn't think of solutions. There were no deals to broker here, no leverage to gain, just questions that begged for answers. He drove home alone. That night, the city blurring through the window. He thought of Maya, her wide, searching eyes. He thought of Alina, quiet, steady, and full of the kind of resilience that doesn't come from privilege, but from surviving what should have broken you. And now there was a chance they were connected by blood. But before he could act, something else happened. The next morning, Alina didn't show up for work. No call, no message. just silence. Worried, Samuel contacted the clinic. They said she and Maya had checked out the night before, cleared for home rest, but they hadn't returned to their apartment. The place was empty, cleaned out, no trace left behind. Panic bloomed. He called Arthur, who immediately began tracing activity, transit cards, phone records, cameras near the clinic. It didn't take long. A black van had pulled up around midnight. No license plate, no ID. Maya had gotten in willingly or not. No one could say. Samuel stood in his office, gripping the window frame as the weight of it all pressed against him. Someone had taken them, and it wasn't random. He was sure now. Someone knew what he and Alina had forgotten. Someone had been waiting all this time, watching from the shadows. And now, as the truth clawed its way back to the surface, they were trying to erase it again. But this time, Samuel wasn't a scared boy with no power. He was a man who had built an empire, and he was going to find them, because this wasn't just about a little girl asking for help anymore. This was about his past, his family, his truth, and no amount of money could buy what he was about to risk to get them back. The storm came without warning, not a storm of rain, but of silence. Silence that stretched over 2 days, then 3. Each hour without word from Elena or Maya felt like a thread being pulled from the fabric of Samuel's world, unraveling everything he thought was stable, everything he thought he had control over. His calendar remained untouched. Meetings went unattended. His staff, confused but respectful, stayed out of his way. There were more important things now than quarterly projections and investor briefings. This wasn't business. This was blood. And Samuel was beginning to believe that everything, every step of his success, had somehow been walking straight toward this. Arthur worked around the clock, burning through every contact he had left from his investigative days. He pulled security footage from nearby buildings, scanned traffic camera records, and traced financial patterns so thin they barely left footprints. And finally, on the 5th day, a break. She used a public library card. Arthur said over the phone, his voice crackling with urgency. Just once. Logged in at a branch in Yonkers for 12 minutes, long enough to search train schedules and emergency shelters. Samuel was already grabbing his coat. Send me the address. That same afternoon, he drove himself something he hadn't done in years through the outskirts of the city, past neighborhoods he hadn't stepped foot in since his early 20s. The library was small, tucked between a shuttered deli and a laundromat with flickering lights. Inside, the librarian recognized Maya instantly. Quiet kid, sweet smile, was with her mother. Both looked tired. She asked about a shelter for women that accepted sick patients. Samuel's heart sank. They were hiding, not from him, but from whoever had forced them to leave. As he stood outside, scanning the block for any other clues, his phone buzzed. It was Arthur. I ran background checks deeper than before. Elena's records weren't just sealed, they were buried beneath layers of false identities and misfiled documents. Whoever did this had power, the kind that comes from inside institutions. Who? Samuel asked. Arthur's voice dropped. The Kensington board. Parts of it specifically. A man named Richard Alcott. He was a board member when the foundation was first formed. He also sat on the hospital board back in the 80s. Samuel frowned. He funded my mother's treatment. I remember that name. Arthur continued. There's more. He was tied to a pharmaceutical case involving illegal testing on patients, a scandal that never went public because the records were conveniently lost. The realization hit Samuel like a punch to the chest. His mother, Elena. They were part of that cover dash. And now, with Elena close to finding out who she really was, with the truth so near, Richard Alcott was tying up old threads. Samuel's hands gripped the steering wheel as he made a choice he hadn't dared consider until now. He wasn't just going to find Alina and Maya. He was going to expose what had happened. All of it, even if it meant tearing down the very empire he'd spent his life building. That night, he met with an old journalist friend, Dana Morales, one of the few reporters he trusted. Fierce, unbribable, unafraid. He handed her copies of Arthur's findings. This story could destroy billionaires, she warned, scanning the documents. Samuel nodded. It almost destroyed children, and it did destroy families. She met his eyes. Are you ready for what happens next? I'm ready, he said, but I need one thing first. He pulled a photo from his wallet, a candid shot of Maya holding a paintbrush, her face mid-laugh. Find them, help me bring them home. What Samuel didn't know was that in a cramped, windowless shelter room 40 miles north, Maya was drawing that same scene, a man standing outside a tall glass tower, looking up, while a little girl held out her hand to him. "Do you miss him?" Elena asked softly from her cot, her voice weak. Maya nodded. "He was going to help us. I think he's still trying." Elena pulled the blanket closer. She didn't want Maya to know how scared she was. The pain in her chest had grown worse. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, and there were moments now when everything felt distant, like she was drifting from the world she'd tried so hard to protect her daughter from. But Maya, brave, beautiful Maya, still believed, and that belief was about to be answered because Samuel Grant wasn't just looking anymore. He was coming, and this time he wasn't alone. It began with a whisper. A quiet message passed from person to person, shelter to shelter, like a thread of hope winding its way through the darkness. Someone was looking for a woman and her child, not to harm them, not to take them away, but to bring them home. Maya didn't know who told her first. Maybe it was the kind old man at the soup kitchen, or the young nurse who handed her a warm sandwich in silence. But the message kept returning, soft but persistent. A man in a grey coat, tall, kind eyes. "He's asking about a little girl who paints." Elena was too weak to rise from bed now. Her breathing had grown shallow, her skin pale, but her eyes, they still held fire. Maya sat beside her, clutching her small hand. "Mum," she whispered, "he's coming. I can feel it." Elena smiled faintly. "You always believed, didn't you?" Maya nodded. "Because you taught me how." And she had. Through every hungry night, every cold morning, every hospital visit, and borrowed coat and empty fridge, Elena had never let Maya forget that even in the worst places, light could break through. And now, it was breaking. Samuel stood at the edge of the shelter lot, scanning the windows. Behind him, Dana Morales adjusted her camera crew. They were filming everything now. Not for drama, but for proof. Proof that the system had failed, that lives had been hidden, stolen, and rewritten for the sake of money and power. Arthur joined them with a quiet nod. "This is the place. They checked in 5 days ago under false names." Samuel didn't wait for protocol. He walked through the shelter doors, past confused staff, until he found the room, room 12, small, cracked, and quiet. He knocked, no answer. He knocked again, gentler this time. A tiny voice came from the other side. "Who is it?" He nearly broke. "It's me, Maya. It's Samuel." A pause, then the sound of footsteps, and the door creaked open just enough for a brown eye to peek out. When she saw him, really saw him, Maya flung the door wide and ran into his arms. Samuel dropped to his knees, holding her tightly, as if anchoring himself to a moment he thought he might never reach. Inside, Elena stirred. "Maya." Samuel rushed to her bedside. She was barely conscious, her breathing ragged. He took her hand. "Elena, I found you. I'm here. You're safe now." Her eyes opened slightly, and for a moment, the fog lifted. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. An ambulance arrived within minutes. Samuel stayed at her side all the way to the hospital, holding her hand while Maya rested her head on his shoulder. The doctors said it was serious organ stress from untreated illness, severe malnutrition, chronic fatigue, but they were hopeful. With proper care, she could recover. As Elena was wheeled into surgery, Maya looked up at Samuel. "She's going to be okay, right?" Samuel bent down, tears in his eyes. "She's going to fight, and I'll be here every step of the way." But the story didn't end there. 3 weeks later, Elena opened her eyes fully for the first time. The room was bright. Maya sat beside her with a sketchbook in her lap, and across the room, Samuel stood by the window, watching the sunrise. "Elena," he said softly, "there's something you need to know." He handed her the sealed letter from his mother, the one that had waited more than 3 decades to be read. Elena's hands trembled as she opened it, her eyes scanning the words, and then she began to cry, not from pain, but from recognition. "She knew," she whispered, "your mother. She knew we were connected. You're not just someone I met by accident." Samuel said, "You're my cousin, my only living family." They didn't speak for a long while after that. Some truths didn't need words. Weeks turned into months. Elena grew stronger. Maya returned to school. Samuel, once consumed by numbers and deadlines, now spent his mornings packing lunches and walking Maya to class. The office still called, the markets still moved, but his world had shifted. He sold the penthouse. donated most of his holdings, founded a new foundation, the Heartwell Grant Initiative, aimed at uncovering hidden injustices, rebuilding shattered lives, and protecting the forgotten. Dana's documentary, The Hidden Files, aired 6 months later. It sparked a national investigation. Richard Alcott resigned from all corporate boards. Others followed. Some were prosecuted. Most ran. But for Samuel, the real victory came one spring afternoon, when Maya's artwork was displayed in a gallery downtown, her piece titled The Man Who Turned Round. The painting showed a tall figure, paused in motion, looking back at a small child holding out her hand. Behind them, the skyline shimmered. Alina, now healthy, stood beside him at the gallery opening. "She saved us," she said, looking at her daughter. Samuel nodded. "She reminded me of who I really was." And Maya, smiling at her painting, whispered to herself, "Sometimes all it takes is one person turning around." The story, long buried in silence, had finally been told, and it changed everything.